So during the question period, one journalist said, well, the United States has always been opposed to the breakup of countries in Africa. Keep the original borders. So why now are you supporting this referendum? So I said, well, the history is that the Eritrean people never had a decision, never had the right to decide for themselves. The UN placed them in part of Ethiopia as a confederation in 1952. And then in 62, the emperor forced them to become a province rather than as an independent state. So that started the war. So I said, I believe they should have a referendum. I asked Meles, well, how do you feel about Eritrea becoming independent? He said, the Ethiopian people don't like that. They want Eritrea to stay as part of Ethiopia. And I said, well, can you do anything about it? He says, I'm not going to fight them because then they'll go back to the mountains and have another...
Fight back again, yeah.
So he said, well, we'll have to live with that. But I know the Ethiopian people don't like that. In my opinion, the 1998 war was started by Meles. Because I've read you've heard of WikiLeaks?
Yes.
This was U.S. communications that were leaked.
Okay.
And I've been reading those, and it looks to me pretty sure that Meles didn't explain to me why they're not ready. But I've been trying to get them to mediate their differences. For example, the question of the delineation of the border. I've been saying, well, look, let's all meet in Geneva, two delegations. We could have a U.S. government person there or a neutral government, UN, and in the morning they will delineate the border. The Eritreans will go into Badme and take over, and then in the afternoon they'll begin talks about getting back to a good relationship again. Unfortunately, there are UN sanctions against Eritrea, which I think are totally unjustified, and the presence of sanctions will make it very hard to have an agreement. In 2011, on the request of the United States, UN Security Council imposed sanctions on Eritrea. They were accused of helping Shabab in Somalia. I've talked to experts, especially in the academic world. I don't have any inside information anymore. And they say, well, we've seen possibility that they were transferring money to the Shabab. But for the last 2 or 3 years, there's absolutely no evidence that they're involved with Shabab. Zero evidence. And in October 2014, 14 of the 15 members of the Security Council voted to lift sanctions. There was only one country that refused, the United States, and they have a veto. So the United States has something against Eritrea.
So my worry is, America, now I'm trying to think like an American, for example. Do you think that America is making a mistake because it looks like it put all of its eggs into one basket, which is TPLF, a minority regime which is not liked by 90% of its own people, and then ignoring Eritrea, because if they bring in Eritrea into the equation, into the formula, they would have more choices in terms of achieving their own strategic interest in the region, but just avoiding not only Eritrea, other neighboring countries, just focusing on one government which is not stable in terms of having grassroots support from its own people.
But unfortunately, the U.S. is preventing Eritrea from normalizing its situation, which I think is very unfortunate.
Champion ናይ ኢትዮጵያ ኮይንካ ክትረአ ክትክእል ምንቲ ነዚ ቻምፒዮንነት እዚ ግዳይ ከተምጽእ ክትክእል ኣለካ ኣብቲ ዙፋን ኮፍ ክትብል ምንቲ ተሓደ ተቀዳማይ ስትራቴጂያዊ ጌጋ ዝበል ኮይኑ ኣብ ዙፋን ኮፍ ክትብል ምንቲ ንኤርትራ ገንሸል ምግባር هلا نحن تبعيسنا هنا مزياتهم كم زي قرنا من أصبح خمسيهم عسب كن وكمنا أمزن قدرنا بزون فترنا نبلكا ناي بوليتيكا مقوسا قوسي ويرالي مقبري هي ناي ارتراخ صاد ماله هذا حدا جنيا استراتيجي نير مسوخا جنشل መሃብ ማለት ንመን እዩ ኣብ ኢትዮጵያ እውን ኮ እቲ ገንሸል ዝቕበል መን እዩ ኢልካ ሕጂ ተመልስካ ክትሪኦ የለን ኣብ ኢሉዥን ሳልሳይ ስትራቴጂያዊ ናይ ኣጠማምታን ኣተሓሳስባን ጌጋ ዝብሎ ኣብ ደገ ምምርኳስ ማለት ብዛዕባ ኣብ ደገ ዘሎ ኣጠማምታ ኩሉ ግዜ ንብዙሓት ኣብ ቀረባ ዘዕልሎም ሰባት ዝብሎ ምስላ ኣሎ ምስ ሓያል ውሽማት ድኻ ተመሳሲልካ ሕደር
People in Africa ultimately would be better off without the UN and its agencies substituting government, substituting programs and distorting the reality on the ground. You cannot be an investigator, a prosecutor, a judge and a police at the same time. It's not someone creature coming from outside and telling us something that he has in his mind and we follow. This relationship the United States has preferred to take us as a scapegoat and we're saying this attitude will have to change. The trendy attitude will have to change and then definitely the United States can expect any party to work towards developing and working relationships with its authorities.
You're saying Eritrea is going to wait 3 or 4 decades before it holds elections?
Maybe more, who knows?
Well, aren't elections a central element of a democracy? And if you don't have elections, then you don't have a democracy.
If you're telling me that democracy and the elections we have witnessed the last 5 or 10 years promoted by the United States as a separate agenda to serve its interests in a number of regions of this world, I can tell you this is not democracy for us. If you mean democracy is polarizing society vertically, that's not democracy for us. And these days it becomes very fashionable for people to talk about democracy when society is divided and polarized along ethnic, religious lines, and we are not party to that kind of democracy.
The one thing is for sure, the mainstream media right around the world hate your country, hate everything to do with it. Why do you think they hate Eritrea so much?
It's part of their psyche. They talk about tolerance, they talk about freedoms, they talk about independence, they talk about sovereignty, they talk about security, interests and values. If anyone raise a voice against their real nature in spite of the pretensions, then you are an enemy.
Well, but you did close down the free press and, you know, just to get to some specifics, there were 2 Eritreans who worked for the US Embassy in Asmara who were imprisoned.
Freedom of press, if you mean the financing and managing of media, the CNN, BBC or even Jazeera International by special interest groups is freedom of press, I can tell you we're not party to that kind of freedom of press.
All right.
First of all, what was your immediate reaction to those that have been supported by the United States leaving power recently?
It's Machiavellian because it's so contradictory that
But they supported Mubarak in Egypt, if we take Egypt.
yes, that's where it comes. When it suits their interests, they will support anyone.
Well, relations between the United States and Eritrea are very poor at the moment. And a few days ago, you called for Washington to, and I'm going to be quoting here, change its frame of thinking and end acts of adventurism. What exactly do you want Washington to do?
Well, it's not only Eritrea, it's not only the Horn of Africa. This has become trendy. It's false assumptions, it's weapons of mass destruction, it's accusations of supporting or sponsoring terror. For me, it's a continuation of one ideology. It's an ideology of slavery. It's an ideology of colonialism. It's an ideology of neocolonialism. It's an ideology, at least in the last 30 years, we can talk about hegemony, controlling. Who doesn't bow to these ideologies, you will be punished if you are not in line with their way of thinking. It's either sanctions, it's either demonizing this or that guy and using all sorts of tools, including the World Bank, IMF, and other tools they use to pressure everybody to bow to this ideology. And people are fed up of this behavior, this culture of domination, hegemony. Everybody is fed up of it.